Here we go. Here we go. Okay, I'm coming through on my camera, thank goodness. And I am coming through on my TikTok. Okay, so everyone can see. We're going to cover chapter 10, part 1 today. And then I will plan on covering part 2 tomorrow. All right, let me go ahead and pull up the chapter notes from chapter 9. As I've been doing, this is from thebestnotes.com. And I'll be beginning with that. 15 years. Oh, wait, whoops. Sorry. 15 years is the chapter we're currently on. Over Burma is the previous chapter. As we might recall, Wally, was it Wally? Yeah. Wally was shot down, can I talk? Over Burma. And he was discovered alive. Okay, I'll just be fast forwarding to the notes. As many people do, and this is again from thebestnotes.com. As many people do in times of need, Candy and Homer found comfort from the people closest to them. They found each other, right? Wally's disappearance and the uncertainty. Well, I'm trying to figure out who else. I guess Candy would be Ray Kendall, and then Homer would be Larch. I can't seem to think of anyone else. I mean, if you can, please drop in the comments. I would say Melanie, but she's not really missed or thought of by Homer. Okay, the intimacy. Sorry, hold on, I skipped ahead. Wally's disappearance and the uncertainty as to whether he was alive draw Homer and Candy closer together. So much so that they have a kid together. Finally, they give in to their feelings and make love. But the intimacy of the act causes Homer to forget to protect himself and Candy from the most ironic mistake, an unwanted pregnancy. But this one, however, is not. Based on my recollection of chapter 9, it is not an unwanted pregnancy. Because they're both very happy with the child. Yeah. So how is that unwanted? I don't know. Seemed like the second child for Candy was better planned for overall. Here again, Candy's response is to wait and see. She refuses to make a decision. She refuses to make a choice when it's presented to her. He keeps the baby the second time around. Yeah. And then, as we might recall from chapter 9, he tries to pass it off as an orphan to Olive to avoid offending her sensibilities too, because again, she might take offense that she's moved on so quickly from Wally. Trying to spare her feelings. Again, I'm doing the recap of chapter 9 before diving into chapter 10. This is from thebestnotes.com if you'd like to follow along. Okay, where am I? Yeah, she waits and sees. She refuses to make a decision. Unlike Homer, who's had so few choices in life, Candy's life has been filled with choices. Instead of embracing the opportunity to choose, Candy shrinks from the responsibility. As a result, she allows Homer to make the choices. Homer chooses to keep the child and deserves a scheme allowing them to hide the fact from Olive and Ray. Aha, so it's actually Homer's idea. Arch's words about an orphan learning deceit come true. Lying is not as taboo for an orphan as it is for those with families whom they have to face. And I'm glad we're reading this because I was under the impression that Candy, it was Candy's choice, but it seems like based on what's written here, she just went along with Homer's choice. Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those like kind of tricky situations where it's like, did she make the choice herself or did she just agree with Homer? I don't know. Based on my interpretation, it seemed like she wanted the child too. I mean, they were in agreement, so I mean, it seems logical that it was also her choice, right? Seems that way. I mean, it's not like she was forced to, at least not in this day and age. Lying is not as taboo for an orphan as it is for those with families they have to face. And really, it seems like maybe it's just me. Please chime in the comments if you agree, but it seems like it's out of character for Homer in chapter 9. It seems like he was totally out of character in this chapter. He just starts thinking of himself. He sees himself as the father, cares about his kid and like nothing else. Well, I mean, that's not entirely true, right? He does also care about Candy. It seems like he transitions from being selfless to self-centered and self-focused in chapter 9. That's my interpretation. And I don't know. He is lying to spare the feelings of Olive, but at the same time, it's like, well, you're the other guy, right? Like, you are the other guy. So, of course, you're trying to cover yourself. You're trying to cover your tracks. It's hard to say, right? If Homer is doing this for himself or if he's doing this for Olive, or if he's doing this to save or preserve the relationship between Candy and Olive. And it just seems like Candy's just going along with it based on this. I mean, I thought that she was in agreement too. Irving also exposes more of Larch's view of love. Larch, who's given up on love, except for the fatherly love he feels for Homer, views love as a disease. Love is not safe as shown by the results of his work. Love, in fact, was very dangerous. It was love for Homer that was making Larch irritable and tentative. It was the realization that Olive loved him that horrified Homer. With love comes the results of love, whether that is a baby or the responsibility to love someone back. Um, yeah. I'm trying to see if I can expand on this. Um, yeah, Larch is, I want to say, a tragic character. Like it seems like he's just constantly cleaning up after people's messes, like aborting kids, taking on orphans, like he's just following people around basically that just don't use birth control. It's like, sorry, Charlie, like you gotta help people get what they want, even if it's considered by some to be wrong or immoral. Um, yeah, I don't know what it means here. Like it was the realization that Olive loved him. Uh, it's a strange choice of words, right? Like horrified. Like really, I think she loved him kind of like a son, and maybe like a son in place of Wally, thinking that Wally, well, and it seemed it was the case from chapter 9 that Olive did not actually believe Wally was dead. He did hold out belief that he was still alive out there somewhere. And so I guess what I'm saying is I don't know why that would horrify Homer. Why would that horrify him? Sure. Yeah, I don't think it would. Okay. All right. Just think Irving could have maybe done a better job less description and more expansion in terms of the motivations of Homer. Why does he seem all of a sudden so self-centered? He wants candy for himself. He wants to have a kid with candy. He wants to say, basically screw you to Wally. I mean, that's how it seems to me. And I've talked about it here on the show too. It's that like kind of like vaguely ambiguous element of like monogamy versus polygamy. Um, like some people call it like sloppy seconds or whatever. Like that was basically Wally's girl. And I mean, you could basically deconstruct the entire concept, right, of possession. People aren't possessions, simply put. So I think Candy should have been able to choose between the two. People who believe in monogamy might be saying that she's a fair weather, though. Like she went with Homer because that's what she had. She didn't have Wally, so she wanted someone to love anyway. And it's kind of a tricky case because Wally, she technically was not a widow. He was just MIA. He was not KIA. So yeah, it's kind of like an awkward situation when Wally comes back. Okay. Yeah, Love's Missing, like that song by why am I forgetting this? E-pop, thank you. E-pop. Love's missing, it's not giving him room to breathe. It's not missing in the case of Homer. It's not missing in the case of Wally. All right, let me begin with chapter 10. People coming, people going. I mean, if you're looking for a beautiful woman, look elsewhere. This is a channel for like complex topics and ideas. This is not like a beauty, whatever they call it, beauty parlor, whatever TikTok basically is. Like, I don't believe in any of that, like, hoo ha, which is why I'm going on hiatus, like I usually do, for 3 days straight when I'm shadow banned, which was the case for the most recent video. I don't get the numbers and I don't need to. There it is. I do what I do because I believe in it. I share my music. I share these ideas because I believe knowledge deserves to be free. Okay? And that's why I kick it. There it is. All right, 15 years. Beginning on chapter 448. And quick math, 448, 521. That is a difference of 52. 52 plus 21 is 73. 73 pages in chapter 10. I'm telling you, man. Irving is not going down without a fight. 73 pages in this chapter. If my math serves. I think it does. 73. After 73 is 36, right? About 36 and a half, somewhere around there. 36, and then I do 36 plus 448. This is all mental math. Hold on. 448 plus 36 is 50 plus 34, which is 4. Let me not lose it. 483, right? See, now I can't even remember what I said. 36 plus 48. 2 becomes 4. 34 plus 50 is 84. 484 is the page that we'll be ending on today. Okay, guys, here we go. And yeah, the fallout of love is a major focus of this book, the Cider House rules. It talks a lot about like rules, but as far as I can tell, the characters aren't following any rules at all. They're basically just playing by their own rules. That's how it seems to me. 15 years, chapter 10. For 15 years, they were a couple, Lorna and Melanie. So Melanie, by this point in the story, I believe, has moved on from Homer. They were set in their ways. Once the young rebels of the women-only boarding house, they now occupied the choicest rooms with the river view, and they served as superintendents to the building for a consideration regarding their rent. Melanie was handy. She had learned plumbing and electricity at the shipyard, where she was one of the staff of 3 electricians. The other 2 were men, but they never messed with Melanie. No one ever would. Lorna became more domestic. She liked the concentration for advanced training at the shipyard, but she remained an employee. Stay on for the pension plan, Melanie had advised her. Lorna actually liked the assembly line monotony, and she was smart about signing up for the overtime pay shifts. She was willing to work at odd hours if she could work less. Being out late bothered Melanie. Lorna became increasingly feminine. Not only wore dresses even to work, and used more makeup and perfume and watched her weight. Her voice, which had once been harsh, actually softened and she developed a smile, especially when she was being criticized. Melanie found her increasingly passive. Well, this is the reason why I basically have nothing against gay people, and I've said that before. Whether you're gay, lesbian, what have you, gay people don't leave anchors behind, okay? They're not like one person once accused me of being a quote unquote breeder, which is like a derogatory term, but I mean, there's an element of truth to that, right? Like, you're not leaving people here in the world trying to fend for themselves. I think, like, kind of expanding upon my own philosophy, that gay people are kind of like nature's mechanism to control for explosive population growth. Because the natural order understands that gay people cannot procreate together. They can adopt, but they can't make babies. Unless, of course, there's like IVF or something like that. And heretofore, nature creates its own solutions. Nature creates solutions, it designs solutions for its own problems, so to speak. All right, let's keep reading about the relationship between Lauren and Melanie, though. As a couple, they rarely fought because Lorna would not fight back. 15 years, she discovered that Melanie relented if there wasn't a struggle, given any resistance. Melanie would never quit. You don't fight fair. Melanie would occasionally complain. You're much bigger than I am, Lorna would say coyly. An understatement. By 1950, when Melanie was 40 something, no one knew exactly how old she was. She weighed 175 pounds. She was 5 feet 8 inches. 5 feet 8 inches tall. She was almost 50 inches round at her chest, which meant she wore men's shirts, large. Anything smaller than a 17-inch neck wouldn't fit her. As her arms were short, she always had to roll up the sleeves. Okay, hold on. I don't know. I don't know what another host would do for me. It's like TikTok numbers, yo. Like, sometimes they just don't make sense. How is it I got like 20 different people, like, who knows how many different people joining my live and I have 0 viewers? Are y'all just figments of my imagination, Mel, Leo, Sarah Webb? Like, dude, it's a clown factory on this app, like, for sure. Like, you're not the clowns, no. The algorithm. Whoever invented this app, those are the real clowns. Because how these numbers make any sense? They don't. It's dumb. Like, the app itself is dumb. Anyway, that's me venting. And again, I do this because it's the right thing to do. Spreading knowledge is something a nice person does. She'd been arrested only once in 15 years for fighting. Actually, the charge was assault, but in the end, she was stuck with nothing more damaging than a disturbance of the peace. I think I skipped ahead. Uh, Her arms were short. She always had to roll up the sleeves. She had a 36-inch waist, only a 28-inch inseam, which meant she had to roll up the cuffs of her trousers or have Lorna shorten them. Melanie's pants were always so tight across her thighs that she quickly lost their crease there. But they were very baggy in the seat. Melanie was not fat. I'll just skip that. He's using another dirty word. Irving is kind of a sailor sometimes. And we saw that with the limericks from Wally, right? I think they were limericks, or were they a different poetic element? I can't remember. I want to say they were like sonnets or something like that. Okay, where was I? When he saw, I think I skipped ahead again. She'd been in the ladies' room of a pizza bar in Bath when some college boy had tried to engage Lorna in conversation. When he saw Melanie take her place beside Lorna at the bar, he whispered to Lorna, "I don't think I could find anyone for your friend." He was imagining a possible double date situation. "Speak up," Melanie said. "Whispering isn't polite." I said, "I don't think I could find a date for you," the boy said boldly. Melanie put her arm around Lorna and cupped her breast. "I couldn't find a sheepdog that would hold still for you," Melanie told the college boy. "So and so," he said as he was leaving. Again, just derogatory term. He thought he'd spoken quietly enough and strictly to impress the shipyard workers at the far end of the bar. He could have known that the men were Melanie's coworkers. They held the college boy while Melanie broke his nose with a metal napkin container. The way that Melanie liked to fall asleep was with her big face on Lorna's tight bare belly. Lorna could always tell when Melanie had fallen asleep because of the change in Melanie's breathing, which Lorna could feel against her pubic hair. Again, Ollie specific, Irving trademark style. In 15 years, there was only one night when Lorna had to ask her friend to move her heavy head before she had soundly fallen asleep. "What is it? You got cramps?" Melanie asked. "No, I'm pregnant," Lorna said. Melanie thought it was a joke until Lorna went into the bathroom to be sick. How'd this happen? No, I'm assuming Lorna's bi. "No, I'm pregnant." When Lorna came back to bed, Melanie said, "I want to try to understand this calmly. We've been like a married couple for 15 years and now you're pregnant." Unless she was making whoopee or something, some people will call it cheating or something. Yeah, unless she was cheating on Melanie, which she might be. Lorna curled herself into a ball, curling the pillows. She covered her head with the other pillow. Her face and her stomach and her private parts were protected, but she still trembled. She began to cry. "I guess what you're telling me," Melanie went on, "is that when women are doing each other," and again, I'm just omitting like vulgar language because I don't know if in the audience maybe there were kids or something. I don't know. I guess I have nothing to worry about because I have all 0 viewers. A bunch of people joining the show, but 0 viewers. Okay. Anyway, something. Hold on. Where was I? When women are doing each other, it takes a lot longer for one of them to get pregnant than when a woman is doing some guy, right? And again, just like pure vulgarity, like absolutely none of this is for kids. For starters, it's too boring for kids. I think that's the biggest problem is it's too boring for kids. Straight up. Like this is not Dr. Seuss. This is some like kind of somewhat semi-thick like medical writing and just very laborious. That's how I put it. It's not like it's not Jane Eyre. Let me put it that way. It is not. Where was I? Lorna didn't answer her. She just went on sniveling. Like about 15 years, like that long. It takes 15 years for women to get pregnant when they're just doing other women. Boy, that's some effort, Melanie said. Not quite, Melanie. Quite, again, unless it's some other situation. She went to the window and looked at the view of the Kennebec. In the summer, the trees were so leafy that the river was hard to see. She let a summer breeze dry the sweat on her neck and chest before she started packing. "Please don't go. Don't leave me," Lorna said. She was still all balled up on the bed. "I'm packing up your things," Melanie said. I'm not the one who's pregnant. I don't have to go nowhere. Don't throw me out, Lorna said miserably. Eat me, but don't throw me out. I think one thing this novel does like exceptionally well is focus on love and relationships, right? It shows Melanie's interactions, Homer's, like it shows both sides of the track. When people are wanted, when they're unwanted, both individuals and unborn fetuses, like what happens, how that all plays out. And it still plays out to this day, right? It still does. I think that aspect of the book is very relevant. Everything else is kind of like what we have to do to get there is kind of like, but that part is actually quite poignant. Like it's good. You take the train to St. Cloud's. When you get there, you ask for the orphanage, Melanie told her friend. It was just a guy, just one guy, and it was just once, Lorna cried. Okay, so she was trying some other flavors, as they say. Which, I mean, chime in the comments. I think it's acceptable to cheat. Do you disagree? What is your opinion? How do I feel about it? I would say it depends on the relationship, really. You might say, well, that's kind of a cop out, but some people have what are called open relationships. Like it does depend on the relationship. Shit, where was I? I keep saying that. I'll try to stay focused, but I like having these asides too because it makes it seem like it's not just like me rote reading. It makes it into more of a discussion, more of like just chatting or live stream. It feels more organic and less robotic, in my opinion. No, it wasn't, Melanie said. A guy gets you pregnant fast. With women, it takes 15 years. She'd packed up Lorna's things. Melanie stood over the bed and shook her friend, who tried to hide under the bed covers. 15 years, Melanie cried. He shook Lorna and shook her, but that was all she did to her. He even walked Lorna to the train. Lorna looked very disheveled, and it was only the early morning of what would be a wilting summer day. I asked for the orphanage? Lorna asked numbly. In addition to her suitcase, Melanie handed Lorna a large carton. And you give this to an old woman named Grogan, if she's still alive, Melanie said. Don't say nothing to her, just give it to her. And if she's dead or not there anymore, Melanie started to say, then she stopped. Forget that, she said. She's either there or she's dead. If she's dead, bring the carton back. You can give it back to me when you pick up the rest of your stuff. The rest of my stuff? Lorna said. I was faithful to you. I was loyal as a dog, Melanie said, more loudly than she meant to speak because the conductor looked at her strangely as if she were a dog. You see something you want? So and so? Again, another bad word. I asked the conductor. So, I mean, it's a complex topic, right? Like loyalty, monogamy. Did Lorna have a different understanding of the relationship? Was she bored in the relationship? All these questions spread out, right? All these like regular conversations that people have. Like, was she cheating? Was she just looking for something else? Like, do you try to put yourself in her shoes? Do you try to just judge her decision? Are there any one of a number of reactions to Lorna getting pregnant? Like, I'm of the belief that people just do what they want to do, whether they're in a relationship or not. There it is. People are going to be themselves. And some people like to walk on the wild side. Lorna is one of those people. Not to condemn Melanie, because, I mean, Melanie was trying to do right in the relationship. It's interesting, right? Very interesting. The train is about to leave, he mumbled. Please don't throw me out, or whispered to Melanie. I hope you have a real monster inside you, Melanie told her friend. I hope it tears you to pieces when they drag it out your door. Lorna fell down in the aisle of the train, as if she'd been punched, and Melanie left her in a heap. The conductor helped Lorna to her feet and into her seat, out the window of the moving train. Watched Melanie walking away. That was when the conductor noticed that he was shaking almost as violently as Lorna. And really, I mean, this is a situation that's played out like countless times, right? Through history. Like, how many relationships ended because someone cheated? A bunch, right? A whole bunch. And honestly, I feel bad for Lorna because everything, and I say this sometimes, everything people say and do is an expression of themselves. If Lorna is, getting pregnant, maybe there was the desire there for her to have a child and she couldn't with Melanie. Maybe again, she was just bored in the relationship. Like, I don't know. I do kind of, again, feel bad for her, even though some people would just call her a dirty cheater or whatever. I don't know. I need to understand more about Lorna's motivations before I would go that far. Lorna fell down the aisle of the train as if she'd been punched. The conductor helped Lorna to her feet and into her seat. Out the window of the moving train, he watched Melanie walking away. That was when the conductor noticed that he was shaking almost as violently as Lorna. Melanie thought about Lorna arriving in St. Cloud's. That turd of a station master, would he still be there? The long walk uphill with her suitcase and a large card for Mrs. Grogan. Could Lorna make it? Would the old man still be in the business? She'd not been angry for 15 years, but now, here was another betrayal, and Melanie pondered how readily her anger had returned. It made all her senses keener. She felt the itch to pick apples again. And of course, aside, I know I'm making a bunch of asides today, but Melanie is a character that people just continuously push away too. As we might recall from early in the book, she had a very hard time finding a placement in terms of foster homes. And then, Homer leaves her, and then, you know, she breaks up with Lorna. It's like she's a very hard time establishing fulfilling relationships. Melanie does, absolutely. She was surprised that it was not with vengeance that she thought of Homer Wells. She remembered how she'd first loved having Lorna as a pal, in part because she can complain to Lorna about what Homer had done to her. Now Melanie imagined she'd like to complain about Lorna to Homer Wells. Yeah, there's a common denominator here, folks. Sorry to tell you, Melanie. That song came to mind, like, that something depends on you. I wouldn't necessarily say it's all Melanie's fault, but I think she needs to, like, focus less on lashing out and just kind of rationalize it as just people are trying to live their lives. Like, people are not rocks, right? Like, we are not stones. We are not written in concrete, so to speak. People change, right? People develop. People get different hobbies. They see other people. They move on. Grow up in some cases. I'm not saying necessarily that was the case. I think it was the case for Homer, definitely. Like he just grew up. He was just like a dumb kid in love, and then he kind of understood that there's more to life than those like hasty youthful romances. Like I don't know what else you might call it. Like just like a fling, basically. That little, she'd tell Homer, if there was anybody with a bulge in his pants, she couldn't keep her eyes off it. Right, Homer would say. It's either they would demolish a building, just shoved into time. When time passes, it's the people who knew you, whom you want to see. They're the ones you can talk to. When enough time passes, what's it matter what they did to you? Melanie discovered that she could think like this for 1 minute, but in the next minute, when she thought of Homer Wells, she thought she'd like to kill him. Again, very emotional, very reactive, Melanie's character. Lorna came back from St. Cloud's and went to the boarding house to retrieve her things. She found that everything had been neatly packed and boxed and gathered in one corner of the room. Melanie was at work, so Lorna took her things and left. After that, they would see each other perhaps once a week at the shipyard or at the pizza bar in Bath where everyone from the yard went. On these occasions, they were polite but silent. Only once did Melanie speak to her. The old woman Grogan? She was alive? Melanie asked. I didn't bring the box back, did I? Lauren asked. You gave it to her, Melanie asked. And you didn't say nothing? Just asked if she was alive, and one of the nurses said she was. So I gave the carton to one of the nurses as I was leaving, Lorna said. And the doctor? Melanie asked. Old Larch? Is he alive? Barely, Lorna said. I'll be damned, said Melanie. Did it hurt? Not much, Lorna said cautiously. Too bad, Melanie said. Should have hurt a lot. In her boarding house, where she was now the sole superintendent, took from a very old electrician's catalog a yellowed article and photograph from the local newspaper. She went to the antique shop that was run by her old dim-witted devotee, Mary Agnes Cork, whose adopted parents had treated her well. They even put her in charge of the family store. Melanie asked Mary Agnes for a suitable frame for the newspaper article and the photograph, and Mary Agnes was delighted to come up with something perfect. It was a genuine Victorian frame taken from a ship that had been overhauled in the Bath yards. Mary Agnes sold Melanie the frame for much less than it was worth, even though Melanie was rich. Electricians are well paid, and Melanie had been working full-time for the shipyard for 15 years. Because she was the superintendent of the boarding house, she lived almost rent-free. She didn't own a car. She bought all her clothes at Sam's Army Navy Men's Store. It was fitting that the frame was teak, the wood of the tree that held Wally Worthington in the air over Burma for one whole night, because the newspaper article was about Captain Worthington, and the picture, which Melanie had recognized 15 years ago, was also of Wally. The article was all about the miraculous rescue of the downed and paralyzed pilot, who had been awarded the Purple Heart. As far as Melanie was concerned, the whole story resembled the plot of a cheap and unlikely adventure movie. But she liked the picture, and part of the article that said Wally was a local hero, a Worthington from those Worthingtons, who for years had owned and managed the Ocean View orchards in Hart's Rock. Yes, I gotta be right back, bio, but I'll kind of talk a little bit about Wally when I get back. Hear me. Okay, be right back. Okay, I'm back. Okay. Wally, yeah, he is markedly different from the other Worthingtons in that he is patriotic. He wants to get back to his country. Um, I think Wally's. I mean, he's an overall good character. Like he's a good guy. He sacrificed for country, basically. In her bedroom, in her boarding house in Bath, Melanie hung the antique frame containing the article and photograph over her bed. In the darkness, she liked knowing it was there, over her head, like history. She liked that as much as looking at the photograph in the daylight hours in the darkness, she would linger over the syllables of that hero's name. Worthington, she liked to say aloud. Ocean View, she said at other times. She was more familiar with saying this. It's rock, she would say, quickly spitting these short words out. In those pre-dawn hours, which are the toughest for insomniacs, Melanie would whisper, 15 years. Just before she would fall asleep, she would ask of the first a flat light that crept into her room, "Are you still there, sunshine?" What is hardest to accept about the passage of time is that the people who once mattered the most to us are wrapped up in parentheses. I think one of the more elegant quotes from Irving. As I said, time reduces everything to ash. Given time will all be as such. Our lives, our relationships, kind of on a dark note, but everything will return to ash. That's why we got to make the most of the time while we're here. Yeah. For 15 years, Homer Wells had taken responsibility for the writing and the posting of the Cider House rules. Every year, it was the last thing he attached to the wall after the fresh coat of paint had dried. Some years he tried being jolly with the rules. Other years he tried sounding nonchalant. Perhaps it had been Olive's tone, and not the rules themselves, that had caused some offense, and thereby made it a matter of pride with the migrants that the rules should never be obeyed. The rules themselves did not change much. The rotary screen had to be cleaned out. A word of warning about the drinking and the falling asleep in the cold storage room was mandatory. Long after the Ferris wheel at Cape Kenneth was torn down, there were so many lights on the coast that the view from the Cider House roof resembled a glimpse from some distant city. The migrants still sat on the roof and drank too much and fell off, and Homer Wells would ask or tell them not to. Rules, he guessed, never asked. Rules told. I don't know. I think even rules you can like deconstruct and be like, well, rules are just what people tell themselves so they can feel like they're good people. You follow the rules, so you're a good boy or girl, you know. But he tried to make the Cider House rules seem friendly. He phrased the rules in a confiding voice. There have been some accidents on the roof over the years, especially at night. Especially in combination with having a great deal to drink while sitting on the roof. I recommend that you do your drinking with both feet on the ground, Homer would write. Every year, the piece of paper itself would become worn and tattered and used for other things. A kind of desperation grocery list. For example, always by someone who couldn't spell. Cornmeal, regular flour, was written across Homer's rules one year. At times, this solitary sheet of paper gathered little insults and mockeries of the semi-literate nature. Nope, me on the roof. Or eat off only in cold storage. Well, I told Homer that only Mr. Rose knew how to write, that the pranks and insults and shopping lists were all composed by Mr. Rose, but Homer could never be sure. Every summer, Mr. Rose would write to Wally, and Wally would tell Mr. Rose how many pickers he needed. Mr. Rose would say how many he was bringing and the day he would arrive, give or take. No contract ever existed, just a short, reliable assurance from Mr. Rose. Some summers he came with a woman, large, soft, and quiet, with a baby girl riding in her hip. By the time the little girl could run around and get into trouble, she was about the age of Angel Wells. Mr. Rose stopped bringing her or the woman. For 15 years, the only migrant who was as constant as Mr. Rose was Black Pan, the cook. "How's your little girl?" Wells would ask Mr. Rose. Every year that the woman and the daughter didn't show up again. "She's growing like your boy," Mr. Rose would say. "And how's your lady?" Homer would ask. "He's looking after the little girl," Mr. Rose would say. Only once in 15 years did Homer Wells approach Mr. Rose on the subject of the Cider House rules. "Hope they don't offend anyone," Homer began. "I'm responsible. I write them every year, and if anyone takes offense, I hope you'll tell me." "No offense," said Mr. Rose, smiling. "They're just little rules," Homer said. "Yes," said Mr. Rose, "they are." And you know what the problem is with rules? You gotta think of consequences. What happens when people break the rules? And of course, there are those people who say every rule has a loophole or something like that. Like, rules were made to be broken, some people say. Do you believe that? Let me know in the comments. It does concern me that no one seems to pay attention to them, Homer finally said. Mr. Rose, whose bland face was unchanged by the years and whose body had remained thin and lithe, looked at Homer mildly. "We got our own rules too, Homer," he said. "Your own rules," said Homer Wells. "About lots of things," said Mr. Rose. "About how much we can have to do with you, for one thing." "With me?" Homer said. With white people, said Mr. Rose. We got our rules about that. I see, Homer said, but he didn't really see. And about fighting, said Mr. Rose. Fighting, said Homer Wells. Homer's obnoxious habit of echoing everything people say. I just prove you're listening, Homer, by just repeating back like a parrot what they just said. With each other, said Mr. Rose. One rule is we can't cut each other bad. Not bad enough for no hospital, not bad enough for no police. We can cut each other, but not bad. I see, Homer said. And really, what good are rules when people come up with their own rules, when they follow their own code? Do you even really need rules in that case? Who is the ultimate authority on rules? You don't, said Miss Rose. You don't see. That's the point. We can cut each other only so bad that you never see. You never know we was cut, you see? Right, said Homer Wells. When are you going to say something else? Miss Rose asked, smiling. Just be careful on the roof, Homer advised him. Nothing too bad can happen up there, Mr. Rose told him. Worse things can happen on the ground. Homer Wells was on the verge of saying right again when he discovered that he couldn't talk. Miss Rose had seized his tongue between his blunt, square index finger and his thumb. A vague taste like dust was in Homer's mouth. Miss Rose's hand had been so fast. Homer had never seen it. He never knew before that someone could actually catch hold of someone's tongue. Caught you, said Mr. Rose, smiling. He let Homer's tongue go. Homer managed to say, You're very fast. Right, said Mr. Rose alertly. Ain't no one faster. Why complain to Homer about the yearly wear and tear on the Cider house roof? Every 2 or 3 years, they had to re-tin the roof or fix the flashing or put up new gutters. What's having his own rules got to do with not paying attention to ours? Wally asked Homer. I don't know, Homer said. Write him a letter and ask him. But no one wanted to offend Mr. Rose. He was a reliable crew boss. He made the picking and the pressing go smoothly every harvest. Candy, who managed the money at Ocean View, claimed that whatever cost they absorbed in repairs to the Cider house roof were more than compensated for by Mr. Rose's reliability. There's something a little gangland style about that guy, Wally said. Not exactly complaining. I mean, I don't really want to know how he gets all those pickers to behave themselves. But they do behave themselves, Homer said. He does a good job, Candy said. Let him have his own rules. Homer Wells looked away. He knew the rules for Candy were all private contracts. I mean, it doesn't seem like Candy plays by anyone's rules except Candy's. 15 years ago, they made their own rules, or really, Candy had made them before Wally came home. They stood in the cider house after Angel was born, on the night when Olive was looking after Angel. They just made love, but not happily. Something was wrong. It would be wrong for 15 years. That night, Candy had said, Let's agree to something. Okay, Homer said. Whatever happens, we share Angel. Of course, Homer said. I mean, you get to be his father. You get all the father time you want to have. I get to have all the mother time I need, Candy said. It's just interesting, the parallels that are drawn with 15 years. You get to be his father. You get all the father time you want. Always, said Homer Wells, but something was wrong. I mean, regardless of what happens, whether I'm with you or with Wally, Candy said. Homer was quiet for a while. So you're leaning towards Wally? He asked. I'm not leaning anywhere, Candy said. I'm standing right here and we're agreeing to certain rules. I didn't know there were any rules, Homer said. We share Angel, Candy said. We both get to live with him. We get to be family. Nobody ever moves out. Am I the only one who's thinking like Candy's like probably the worst mom ever? I think so. She's like, I think we'll share this. I threw the last one away. It's fine. I'll let you share this. I'm like, what kind of relationships are these? Even if you're with Wally, Homer said after a while, and again, Wally, Wally, Wally. He was the original Homer. Like, I don't know. Remember what you told me when you wanted me to have Angel? Candy asked him. Homer was cautious now. Remind me, he said. You said that he was your baby too, that he was ours. That I could decide all by myself not to have him. That was the point, Candy said. It's like, why does that have to be clarified? I don't know, again, like twisted relationships. Yes, Homer said, I remember. Well, if he was ours then, he's ours now. Whatever happens, Candy repeated. In the same house? Asked Homer Wells. Even if you go with Wally? Like a family, Candy said. Like a family, said Homer Wells. It was a word that took a strong grip of him. Orphan is a child forever. An orphan detests change. An orphan hates to move. An orphan loves routine. For 15 years, Homer Wells knew that there were possibly as many cider house rules as there were people who had passed through the cider house. Even so, every year he posted a fresh list. For 15 years, the Board of Trustees had tried and failed to replace Dr. Larch. They couldn't find anyone who wanted the job. People dying to throw themselves into the unrewarded service of their fellow man, but there were more exotic places than St. Cloud's where their services were needed, and where they could also suffer. The Board of Trustees couldn't manage to entice a new nurse into service there either. They couldn't hire even an administrative assistant. It's got to be a weird place, right? Like a lot of birth, a lot of death. Dr. Gingrich retired not from the board. He would never retire from the board. He mused about accepting the position in St. Cloud's, but Mrs. Goodall pointed out to him that he wasn't an obstetrician. Well, I should clarify, some people would not call it death because people believe life starts at birth. I think I'm one of those people too. Like it starts at birth. So it's not technically death. I don't know. I think it's like a gray area. Like, would you call abortion death? Drop a comment if you do. Psychiatric practice had never flourished in Maine. Dr. Gingrich was surprised and a little hurt to learn that Mrs. Goodall enjoyed pointing this out to him. Mrs. Goodall had reached retirement age herself, but nothing could have been farther from that woman's zealous mind. Uncle Larch was 90-something. Mrs. Goodall was so obsessed with retiring him before he died. She realized that to have Larch die while still in service would register as a kind of defeat for her. Well, I mean, shoot, Larch has been there so long, he's like, might as well be part of the wallpaper, or whatever the expression is. Like, he's one with the floorboards. Not long ago, perhaps in an effort to invigorate the board, Dr. Gingrich had proposed they hold a meeting in an off-season hotel in Algonquin, simply to break the routine of meeting in their usual offices in Portland. Make it a kind of outing, he proposed, the ocean air and all. But it rained. In colder weather, the wood shrank. It sanded on the windows, doors, and crunched underfoot. The drapes and the towels and the bedsheets were gritty. The wind was off the ocean. No one could sit on the veranda because the wind blew the rain under the roof. The hotel provided them with a long, dark, empty dining room. They held their meeting under a chandelier that no one could turn on. No one could find the right switch. It was appropriate to their discussion of St. Cloud's that they attempted to conduct their business in a former ballroom that had been seen better days. In a hotel so deeply in the off-season that anyone seeing them there would have suspected they'd been quarantined. In fact, when he got a glimpse of them, that is what Homer Wells thought. He and Candy were the hotel's only other off-season guests. They'd taken a room for half the day. They were a long way from Ocean View. They'd come as far to be sure that no one would recognize them. It was time for them to leave. They stood outside on the veranda, Candy with her back against Homer's chest, his arms wrapped around her. They both faced out to sea. He appeared to like the way the wind whipped her hair back in his face, and neither of them seemed to mind the rain. Inside the hotel, Mrs. Goodall looked through the streaked window, frowning at the weather and at the young couple braving the elements. In her opinion, nothing could ever be normal enough. That was what was wrong with Larch. Not everyone who's 90-something is senile. She would grant you, but Larch wasn't normal. Even if they were a young married couple, public displays of affection were not acceptable to Mrs. Goodall. And they were calling all the more attention to themselves by their defiance of the rain. What's more, she remarked to Dr. Gingrich, who was given no warnings and no map in which he could have followed her thoughts, I'll bet they're not married. Yeah, I don't think they are they? Yeah, I don't think they are. They believe in that free love. What's more, she remarked to Dr. Gingrich, who was given no warning and no map. Yeah, but they're not married. The young couple he thought looked a little sad. Perhaps they needed a psychiatrist. Perhaps it was the weather. They'd been planning to sail. It's probably just all those doggone rules, Mrs. Goodall. Probably, I don't know. Figured out what he is, Mrs. Goodall told Dr. Gingrich, who thought she was referring to the young man, Homer Wells. He's a non-practicing homosexual, Mrs. Goodall announced. She meant Dr. Larch, who was on her mind night and day. Yeah, just let it all loose. Just get all, just zero filter, zero restraint. Just tell us how you really feel. And as we know, it's not that he's homo. He got AIDS the first time. He was given hooker when he graduated medical school. He practices celibacy as a way of protecting others. Larch is a very selfless character. It has nothing to do with his sexuality. Well, I should clarify. It does and does not have to do with sexuality. Like his sexuality is the reason why, but it is not. It's not as she thinks. It's not her assessment of the situation. She met Dr. Larch, who was on her mind that day, and I'm not even entirely sure why she would say that. There's absolutely no proof at all that Larch was gay. I mean, you could maybe say like because he kissed the boys, the orphans to sleep, but I mean even that's kind of a stretch to make. I think he was being more paternal when he did that. I don't think it was him expressing his homosexuality. I don't think it was. And even if it was, like I still don't know why she would say that. Like it makes no sense to me at all. Like this is a 90 some odd year old man. Why? It's one of those things that people say. It's like, what was the point of that? Why would you say that? I don't know if I'll go so far as to say he was her boss, but he was more or less a hero of St. Cloud's. Like he was an important guy. He was someone who like gave many years of his life to help others through this hospital. So I don't know what the reason is for her remark. I don't know. And she's like just one of the people working there. It's like, okay. Dr. Gingrich was rather amazed at what struck him as Mrs. Goodall's wild guess, but he looked at the young man with renewed interest. She's the head of the girls' division, right? The girls' division in the hospital, or, St. Cloud's. True, he was not actually funneling the young woman. He seemed a trifle distant. And I mean, maybe you could make that assessment based on his relationship with Homer, right? But I mean, it seems to me even that relationship is paternal in nature. It's not, it doesn't seem to me like any other kind of way, really. We could catch him at it. We'd have him out in a minute, Mrs. Goodall observed. Of course, we'd still have to find someone willing to replace him. Dr. Gingrich was lost. He realized that Mrs. Goodall couldn't be interested in replacing the young man on the veranda. Therefore, he was still thinking about Dr. Larch. If Dr. Larch were not practicing homosexual, what could they ever catch him at? And what is the point of even saying something like that? Like, what does that even mean? It's just an Irvingism. Like, what does that even mean? He's a non-practicing straight guy. What does that even mean? Are you, celibate? Are you? It's just like a nonsensical statement. Like, what? We would catch him at being homosexual and not just practicing as such. All right, here we go. Hold on. I renew my TikTok. I mean, you could say like they're in the closet or something. I don't really know. Or like what they call undercover or something. I don't know. We would catch him at being a homosexual, just not practicing as such. Dr. Gingrich asked cautiously. It was not hard to rile Mrs. Goodall. He's obviously queer, she snapped. Dr. Gingrich, in all of his years of psychiatric service to Maine, had never been moved to apply the label of non practicing homosexual to anyone. Although he had often heard of such a thing, usually someone was complaining about someone else's peculiarity. And I think the main thing that confuses me is why does she resort to the label homo? Does she really know Larch that well? No, she doesn't. You're basically coworkers, right? Like you don't really know him that way. So I don't know. In Mrs. Goodall's case, she despised men who lived alone. Ah, there we go. There it is. It wasn't normal. Like why make this like comment? Like just pure hatred. She despised young couples who displayed their affection or weren't married or both. Too much of what was normal also enraged her. Like she just does not understand Larch at all. And it's strange considering how long they've worked together too. Like although he shared with Mrs. Goodall the desire to replace Dr. Larch and his staff at St. Cloud's, it occurred to Dr. Gingrich that he should have had Mrs. Goodall as a patient. She might have kept him out of retirement for a few more years. When the young couple came inside the hotel, Mrs. Goodall gave them such a look that the young woman turned away. Did you see her turn away in shame? Mrs. Goodall would ask Dr. Gingrich later. The young woman stared her down, looked right through her. Dr. Gingrich marveled. It was one of the best looks in the tradition of withering that Dr. Gingrich had ever seen, and he found himself smiling at the young couple. Here's another character that I think is just changed for the worse. Homer and then Miss Goodall. Like she used to be just shocked whenever Melanie would like us, and now she's like, there's that non-practicing homo. What's the matter with him? He's not flagrantly going around sleeping with everybody. Like, lady, what happened to you? So, what happened? Who hurt you, Mrs. Goodall? Who hurt you? Did you see that couple? And he asked them later in the long drive back to Ocean View. I don't think they were married, said Homer Wells. They're married, they hate each other. What? Maybe that's why I thought they were married, Candy said. Looked a little stupid, and she looked completely crazy, Homer said. I know they were married, Candy said. The sad, dingy dining room in Algonquin, while the rain pelted down, Mrs. Goodall said, it's just not normal. Dr. Larch, those old nurses, the whole bit. Someone new in some capacity isn't hired soon. I say we send a janitor up there, just anyone who can look the place over and tell us how bad it is. Maybe it's not as bad as we think, Dr. Hayward said tiredly. He'd seen the young couple leave the hotel, and they'd filled him with melancholy. Let someone go there and see, Mrs. Goodall said, the dark chandelier above her small gray head. Then, in the nick of time, in everyone's opinion, a new nurse came to St. Cloud's. Remarkably, she appeared to have found out about the place all by herself. Here's Caroline, they called her. She was constantly of use, and a great help when Melanie's present for Mrs. Grogan arrived. What is it? Mrs. Grogan asked. The carton was almost too heavy for her to lift. Nurse Edna and Nurse Angela had brought it over to the girls' division together. It was a sweltering summer afternoon, still, because it had been a perfectly windless day. Nurse Edna had sprayed the apple trees. Mr. Larch came to the girls' division to see what was in the package. Go on, open it, he said to Mrs. Grogan. I haven't got all day. Mrs. Grogan was not sure how to attack the carton, which was sealed with wire and twine and tape, as if a savage had attempted to contain a wild animal. Nurse Caroline was called for her help. I believe this was Lorna's carton. Someone chip in the comments. Do you think it's from her or someone else? What is your estimation? What would they do without Nurse Caroline? Larch wondered. Before the package for Mrs. Grogan, Nurse Caroline had been the only large gift that anyone sent to St. Cloud's. Homer Wells had sent her from the hospital in Cape Kenneth. Homer Wells knew that Nurse Caroline believed in the Lord's work, and he had persuaded her to go where her devotion would be welcome. But Nurse Caroline had trouble opening Melanie's present. Who left it? Mrs. Grogan asked. Someone named Lorna, Nurse Angela said. I never saw her before. All right, winner, chicken dinner. Anyone who had the same prediction as me, good job. Someone named Lorna and left it. I never saw her before either, said Wilbur Larch. When the package was open, there was still a mystery. Inside was a huge coat, much too large for Mrs. Grogan. An army surplus coat made for the Alaskan service. It had a hood and a fur collar and was so heavy that when Mrs. Grogan tried it on, it almost dragged her to the floor. She lost her balance a little and wobbled around like a top, losing its spin. The coat had all sorts of secret pockets, which were probably for weapons or mess kits, or the severed arms and legs of enemies, said Dr. Larch. Yeah, somehow I doubt that, Larch. Somehow I doubt that, but okay. Mrs. Grogan, again, just nonsensical statements. Mrs. Grogan, lost in the coat and perspiring, said, I don't get it. Then she felt the money in one of the pockets. She took out several loose bills and counted them, which was when she remembered that it was the exact amount of money that Melanie had stolen from her when Melanie had left St. Cloud's, taking Mrs. Grogan's coat with her more than 15 years ago. Oh my God, Mrs. Grogan cried, fainting. Nurse Carolyn ran to the train station, but Lorna's train had already left. When Mrs. Grogan had revived, she cried and cried. That dear girl, she cried, while everyone soothed her and no one spoke. Arch and Nurse Angela and Nurse Edna remembered Melanie as anything but dear. Arch tried on the coat, which was also too big and heavy for him. Staggered round in it for a while, frightened one of the smaller girls in the girls' division would come into the lobby to investigate Mrs. Grogan's cries. Arch found something in another pocket, the snipped, twisted ends of some copper wire and a pair of rubber-handed insulated wire cutters. On his way back to the boys' division, Arch whispered to Nurse Angela that she raped some electrician. A big electrician, Nurse Angela said. Yeah, Melanie, she's kind of a shifty character, right? Stealing stuff. Although you could potentially redeem Melanie, saying she just came from a messed up background. That's why she did that. You too, Ursena scolded him. It's a warm coat anyway. At least it will keep her warm. Give her a heart attack, lugging her around, Dr. Larch said. I can wear it, Nurse Angela. Sorry, not Nurse Angela. Nurse Caroline commented. It was the first time that Larch and his old nurses realized that Nurse Caroline was not only young and energetic, she was also big and strong. In a much less crude and vulgar way, a little reminiscent of Melanie. If Melanie had been a Marxist, thought Wilbur Larch, and an angel. Larch had trouble with the word angel since Homer Wells and Candy had taken their son away from St. Cloud's. Larch had trouble with the whole idea of how Homer was living. For 15 years, Wilbur Larch had been amazed that the three of them, Homer and Candy and Wally, had managed it. He wasn't at all sure what they had managed, at what cost. He knew, of course, that Angela was a wanted child. Sorry, not Angela. Angel. Angel was a wanted child and well loved and well looked after, or else Larch couldn't have remained silent. It was difficult for him to remain silent about the rest of it. Glad they arranged it. See, and based on the writing of Irving, it's hard to sparse out like who Angel was unwanted by. He was wanted, ultimately, Angel. So, yeah. I mean, it doesn't really matter if it was Candy's original idea or not. Like, I mean, he was wanted ipso facto by the fact itself. He was wanted just based on Irving's writing. Who might advocate honesty in all relationships? He wondered. Me with my fictional histories, me with my fictional hurt defects, you with my fuzzy stone. And who was he to ask exactly what the sexual relationship was? Did he need to remind himself that he had slept with someone else's mother and dressed himself in the light of her daughter's cigar? He allowed to die a woman who would put a penis. Darn it. Sorry, I gotta freaking censor Irving. Dang you, Irving. Please just make it PG, dude. Just make it PG. Put a pony in her mouth. Whatever. It's so dumb. It's like just I don't know. Man, I don't know. It's written here, okay? I don't know. Don't censor me. It's him. It's not me. I didn't do a good enough job censoring him because I have to put him through a filter before he's acceptable for a general audience. Arch looked out the window at the apple orchard on the hill. That summer of 1950, the trees were thriving. The apples were mostly pale green and pink. These were a vibrant dark green. The trees were almost too tall for her head and to spray with the Indian palm. Really, that is probably my main criticism of Irving. It's not his obnoxious level of detail. It's his oddly specific, just weird stuff. Like, just completely freaking weird. Like, there's no other word for it. It's just weird. It's weird. There's no other word for it. It's weird. There's nothing else like it. You might be able to find stuff like that, like on like dark corners of the internet, maybe. It's just so weird. Just weird. Anyway, she asked Nurse Caroline to take over the tending of them, Dr. Lurch thought. He wrote a note to himself and left it in the typewriter. The heat made him drowsy. He went to the dispensary and stretched himself out on the bed. In summer, with the window open, he could risk a slightly heavier dose, he thought. The last summer that Mr. Rose was in charge of the picking crew at the Ocean View was the summer of 1950, when Angel Wells was 15. All that summer, Angel had been looking forward to the next summer, when he would be 16, old enough to have his driver's license. By that time, he imagined he would have saved enough money for his summer job in the orchard from his contribution to the harvest to buy his first car. His father, Homer Wells, didn't own a car. When Homer went shopping in town or when he volunteered at the hospital in Cape Kenneth, he was one of the farm vehicles. The old Cadillac, which had been equipped with a hand-operated brake and accelerator so Wally couldn't drive it, was often available, and Candy had her own car, a lemon yellow Jeep, which she had taught Angel to drive, and which was as reliable in the orchards as it was sturdy on the public roads. I taught your father how to swim, Candy always told Angel. I guess I can teach you how to drive. Of course, Angel knew how to drive all the farm vehicles, too. He knew how to mow, how to spray, how to operate a forklift. Driver's license was simply necessary. Official approval of something Angel did very well on the farm. For a 15-year-old, looked much older. He could have driven all over Maine, and no one would have questioned him. He would be taller than his boyish, round-faced father. They were dead even as the summer began, and there was a defined angularity in the bones of his face that made him seem already grown up. Even the trace of a beard was there. The shadows under his eyes were not unhealthy looking. They served only to accent the vivid darkness of his eyes. It was a joke between father and son that the shadows under Angel's eyes were inherited. You get your insomnia from me, Homer Wells would tell his son, who still thought he was adopted. You've got no reason to feel adopted, his father had told him. You got 3 parents, really. The best that most people get is 2. Kind of weird how that played out, too. Like, Wally leaves. Candy says she's going to wait, but she doesn't. And, yeah, now there are 2 dads. It's weird. She keeps saying, too, like, I'm going to wait and see. I'm going to wait and see. And then she doesn't. So you're like, okay, what was the point of you saying that? You didn't wait at all, really. You didn't wait at all. Candy had been like a mother to him. Wally was a second father, or the favorite eccentric uncle. The only life Angel had known was a life with all of them. He'd never suffered so much as a change of rooms. Everything had been the same since he could remember it. It would have been Wally's room, the one Wally had shared with Homer. Angel had been born into a real boy's room, grown up surrounded by Wally's tennis and swimming trophies, and the pictures of Candy with Wally when Wally's legs worked. Even the picture of Candy teaching Homer how to swim. Wally's purple heart, which Wally had given Angel, was hung on the wall over the boy's bed. It concealed an oddly smeared fingerprint, Olive's fingerprint from the night when she crushed a mosquito against the wall. It was the same night Angel Wells had been conceived in the cider house. After 15 years, the wall needed a fresh coat of paint. And I guess on that note, do you think Irving, chime in the comments, do you think Irving needs censorship because of his vulgarity? Homer's room down the hall had been the master bedroom. It had been Olive's room and the room where Senior had died. Olive herself had died in Cape Kenneth Hospital before the war was over, even before they'd sent Wally home. It was an inoperable cancer, which spread very quickly after they'd done the exploratory. Homer and Candy and Ray had taken turns visiting her. One of them was always with Angel, but Olive was never alone. Homer and Candy had said privately only to each other that things might have worked out differently if Wally made it back to the States before Olive had died. Because of Wally's precariousness and the added difficulty of moving him in wartime, it was thought best not to tell Wally of Olive's cancer. That's how Olive wanted it too. In the end, Olive thought Wally had come home. She was pumped, so full of painkillers that she mistook Homer for Wally in their last few meetings. Homer had been in the habit of reading to her, from Jane Eyre, from David Copperfield, and from Great Expectations. He gave that up when Olive's attention began to wander. First few times, Olive confused Homer with Wally. Homer couldn't be sure whom she thought she was addressing. I mean, it's better than him reading War and Peace, right? Something else is like he just keeps reading these books, the same books over and over again. David Copperfield. What is it? Jane Eyre and Great Expectations. Just over and over. He keeps reading them. He read them to the orphans. He read them to Olive. Larch read them too, right? Larch read them, Melanie read them. Just over and over and over. You must forgive him, Olive said. Her speech was slurred. She took Homer's hand, which she did not really hold so much as contain in her lap. Forgive him? Said Homer Wells. Yes, Olive said. He can't help how much he loves her or how much he needs her. To Candy, Olive was clear. He's going to be crippled. He's going to lose me. If he loses you too, who's going to look after him? I'll always look after him, Candy said. Homer and I will look after him. But Olive was not so drugged that she failed to detect and dislike the ambiguity of Candy's answer. It's not right to hurt or to deceive someone who's already been hurt and deceived, Candy, she said. With the drug she was taking, Olive felt a perfect freedom. It was not for her to tell them that she knew what she knew. It was for them to tell her what they were keeping from her. Until they told her, she could keep them guessing about what she knew. Yeah, more wordplay from Irving. To Homer, Olive said, he's an orphan. Who is? Homer asked. He is, she said. Don't you forget how needy an orphan is. He'll take everything. He's come from having nothing, and he sees what he can have. He'll take everything he sees. My son, Olive said, don't blame anyone. Blame will kill you. Yeah, and actually, Olive is like Ray. Sorry, not Ray, but it's Senior. Yeah, Ray's like Senior. Like she's getting details confused. She thinks Homer is Wally. Um, actually, not her fault. She thinks that Angel is an orphan, an adopted orphan. Actually, that is not her fault. Uh, yes, said Homer Wells, who held Olive's hand. When he bent over her to hear how she was breathing, she kissed him as if he were Wally. Blame will kill you, he repeated to Candy. After Olive had died. Dread remorse, said Homer Wells, forever recalling Mr. Rochester's advice. Don't quote to me, Candy told him. The thing is, he's coming home, and he doesn't even know his mother's dead. Not to mention, Candy said. Then she stopped talking. To mention, said Homer Wells. Yeah. I mean, he's gonna come home to some very unusual news. Like, your mom's dead, and here's her adopted son. And really, Olive didn't need to know. I mean, do you have a different opinion? Please let me know in the comments. Do you agree or disagree that Olive should have known the reality of the relationship between Candy and Angel? Or was it for her own good that she did not understand? Because again, I mean, there must have been a doubt in Olive's mind, right? Like, do you think it's like Candy to adopt kids from the orphanage? I don't think so. She's not the adopting type. Let's just put it that way. She's the kind of person that says wait and see, and then she doesn't wait at all. That's the kind of person Candy is. Candy and Wally were married less than a month after Wally returned to Ocean View. Wally weighed 147 pounds. Wells pushed the wheelchair down the church aisle. And again, did I not just say that? She does not wait. He's back, bada boom, bada bing, automatically she marries Wally. I wouldn't say automatically because she waited a whole month, but I mean, still, like, in reality, that's not long at all. Marrying someone after a month is not very long. And sure, I mean, they dated before he went to the war, so, I mean, technically it's not that abrupt of a decision, but still, he's not known for waiting. Wally weighed 147 pounds. Homer Wells pushed the wheelchair down the church aisle. Kenny and Wally occupied the converted bedroom on the ground floor of the big house. Homer Wells had written to Wilbur Larch shortly after Wally had come home. Olive's death, Homer wrote to Larch, had fixed things for Candy and Wally more securely than Wally's paralysis, or than whatever sense of betrayal and guilt might have plagued Candy. Candy's right. Don't worry about Angel, Wilbur Larch had written to Homer Wells. Angel will get enough love. Why would he feel like an orphan if he never is one? If you're a good father to him and Candy's a good mother to him, And if he's got Wally loving him too, you think he's going to start missing some idea of who his so-called real father is. Larch understands the reality, right? The problem is not going to be Angel's problem. It's going to be yours. You're going to want him to know you're his real father because of you, not because he's going to need to know. Problem is, you're going to need to tell. You and Candy, you're going to be proud. It'll be for you and not for Angel. And you're going to want to tell him he's no orphan. This whole time they've been lying to their son. Like, wow. Telling him he's an orphan, but he's not. What the? What? Yeah, because that's not going to damage the boy at all. Yeah, your parents didn't want you and we adopted you and now everything's and it turns out actually you're our son. Like what? What is wrong with these people? Like what is the matter with you? Anyway, and what's interesting is Wally also didn't know, right? Yeah, also do it for Wally. To himself or as an entry in a brief history of St. Cloud's, Wilbur Larch wrote, here in St. Cloud's, we have just one problem. His name is Homer Wells. He's a problem wherever he goes. Thank you. I'm glad someone said it. Homer changed. And not for the better. He turned from someone who's like giving his all for orphans into this like self-serving guy who steals other guys' girls and then he gets them pregnant and then he basically becomes a liar. Like he becomes a complete reversal of who he was. What happened to him, really? Aside from the darkness in his eyes and an ability to sustain a pensive, faraway look that was both alert and dreaming, Angel Wells resembled his father very little. He never thought of himself as an orphan. He knew he'd been adopted. He knew he came from where his father had come from. Or came from. He knew he was loved. He'd always felt it. What did it matter that he called Candy Candy and Homer Dad? Wally Wally. This was the second summer that Angel Wells had been strong enough to carry Wally up some steps or into the surf or out of the shallow into the pool and back in a wheelchair. Homer had taught Angel how to carry Wally into the surf when they went to the beach. Wally was a better swimmer than any of them, but he needed to get into deep enough water so that he could either float over a wave or duck under one. You just can't let him get dragged around in the shallow water, Homer had explained to his son. There were some rules regarding Wally. There were always rules, Angel had observed. As good a swimmer as he was, Wally was never allowed to swim alone, and for many summers now, Angel Wells had been Wally's lifeguard whenever Wally swam his laps or just floated in the pool. Almost half of the physical contact between Wally and Angel occurred in the water, where they resembled otters or seals. They wrestled and dunked each other so ferociously, I need to slow down, that Candy couldn't help being anxious at times for both of them. Wally was not allowed to drive alone. Even though the Cadillac had hand-operated controls, someone else had to collapse the wheelchair and put it in or take it out of the back of the car. First collapsible wheelchairs were quite heavy. The Wally would occasionally drag himself through the ground floor of the house using one of those metal walkers. His legs were mere props. In unfamiliar terrain, he needed his wheelchair. In rough terrain, he needed a pusher. So many times the pusher had been Angel, so many times Angel had been the passenger in the Cadillac. Although Homer and Candy might have complained if they had known, Wally had long ago taught Angel to drive the Cadillac. Hand controls make it easy, kiddo, Wally would say. Your legs don't have to be long enough to reach the pedals. That was not what Candy had told Angel about teaching him to drive the Jeep. As soon as your legs were long enough to reach the pedals, she told him, kissing him. Which she did whenever she had the excuse. I'll teach you how to drive. The time came and never occurred to Candy that Angel had been so easy to teach because he'd been driving the Cadillac for years. Yeah, interestingly, Wally is actually the one who taught him how to drive, right? Which is definitely interesting. I mean, even Candy can't honor her promises. which is also a recurring theme in this book. People who don't honor their promises, people who make promises and then they aren't delivered for whatever reason. Some rules are good rules, kiddo, Wally would tell the boy kissing him, which Wally did a lot, especially in the water. But some rules are just rules. You just got to break them carefully. And again, it does highlight Wally's selflessness too, right? Because here's a boy, he thinks he's an orphan, he thinks he's adopted, and he still treats him like a son. Like that again, that is freaking huge for Wally. Like here is a good dude. Like I would say, complete contrast to Homer's character by this the third act of the book. Like completely selfless character Wally in this book, Cider House Rules. It's dumb that I have to be 16 before I get a driver's license, Angel told his father. Not that dumb, actually. For those of you at home, you know why. Because young people tend to get in a disproportionate amount of accidents. So really, it's not that dumb. Right, said Elmer Wells. You should make an exception for kids who grew up on farms. I mean, yeah. If it's dumb, it's not for the reason that they're saying. I mean, if you're a special case, you're a special case. But I mean, it's that is a sound rule, right? That is not a dumb rule. That is a sound rule. It's a sound rule because we don't need a bunch of accidents, people crashing into other people because they're not experienced. And that it doesn't always happen, right? But it's like again, the more experience you have, the less likely it is. And you can look up the statistics too. Most accidents happen when people are first getting their license, whether that's a permit or a driver's license. Sometimes Angel played tennis with Candy, but more often he hit balls back to Wally, who maintained his good strokes even sitting down. The club members had complained a little about the wheelchair tracks on the clay, but what would the Haven Club have been without tolerating one or another Worthington eccentricity? Wally would set the wheelchair in a fixed position and hit only forehands for 15 or 20 minutes. Angel's responsibility was to get the ball exactly to him. Then Wally would move the chair and hit only backwards. It's actually better practice for you than me, kiddo. Wally would tell Angel. Again, he treats him like a son. Wally and Angel, yeah. Just amazing dude, Wally. At least I'm not getting any better. Angel got a lot better. He was so much better than Candy that it sometimes hurt his mother's feelings when she detected how boring it was for Angel to play with her. Homer Wells didn't play tennis. He'd never been a games man. He resisted even the indoor football at St. Cloud's. Although he occasionally dreamed of stickball, usually with Nurse Angela pitching, she was always the hardest to hit. Homer's Descent, dude. This novel could have been renamed Homer's Descent. Basically, is what happened. Homer Wells had no hobbies. Like he just becomes like increasingly more pathetic as the novel goes on. Nothing beyond following Angel around as if Homer were his son's pet. Dog waiting to be played with. Pillow fights in the dark, they've been popular for a few years. Kissing each other goodnight and then finding excuses to repeat the ritual, finding novel ways to wake each other in the morning. If Homer was bored, he was also busy. He'd continued his volunteer work for Cape Kenneth Hospital. In a sense, he never stopped his war effort. His service as a nurse's aide. He was a veteran reader of medical literature. The Journal of the American Medical Association and the New England Journal of Medicine were very acceptably piled up on the tables and in the bookcases of the Ocean View House. And he objected to the illustrations in the American Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology. I need a little intellectual stimulation around here, Homer Wells would say whenever Candy complained about the graphic nature of this material. Well, they're medical books and journals, right? Like I just don't think that Angel has to see it, Candy said. He knows I have a little background on the subject, Homer said. I don't object to what he knows. I object to the pictures, Candy said. There's no reason to mystify the subject for the child, Wally said, taking her side. Well, and of all the things for Candy to be opposed to, medical literature, really? There's no need to make the subject grotesque either, Candy argued. I don't think it's either a mystery or grotesque. Either, Candy argued. Oh, sorry, on that was Angel. I don't think it's either a mystery or grotesque, Angel said. The summer he was 15. It's just interesting. You're not even going out with girls yet, Candy said, laughing and taking the opportunity to kiss him. She bent over him to kiss him. She saw in her son's lap the illustration that was featured in an article on vaginal operations. The illustration indicated the lines of incision for the removal of the vulva and a primary tumor in an extended radical vulvectomy. Let me see if I'm saying this right. Vulvectomy. Again, she's acting like this is a Playboy or something. Like, just chill out. Jeez Louise. Homer, Kenny shouted. Homer was upstairs in his very spare bedroom. His life was so spare he tacked only two things on the walls. One of those was in his bathroom. By his bed, he had a picture of Wally in his flyer scarf and sheepskin. Wally was posing with the crew of Opportunity Knox. The shadow from the wing of the dark plane completely obscured the face of the radio man, and the glare of the Indian sun completely whited out the face of the crew chief, who had eventually died of his colon complication. Only Wally and the co-pilot were correctly illuminated, although Homer had seen better pictures of them both. The co-pilot sent Wally a picture of himself and his growing family every Christmas. He had 5 or 6 children and a plump wife. But every year the co-pilot looked thinner. The amoeba he'd contracted in Burma had never entirely left him. In the bathroom, Homer had tacked up the blank questionnaire. The extra copy, the one he'd never sent back to the Board of Trustees at St. Cloud's, the exposure to the steam from the shower had given to the paper of the questionnaire the texture of the parchment lampshade, but each question had remained readable and idiotic. The master bed was higher than most, because in his day, Senior Worthington had enjoyed looking out the window while lying down. It was a feature Homer also appreciated about the bed. He could oversee the pool from up there, and he could see the cider house roof. I liked to lie on that bed for hours, just looking out the window. Homer, Kenny called to him, please come see what your son is reading. That was the way they all talked. Kenny said your son to Homer. That's how Wally spoke too. Angel always said Dad or Pop when he addressed his father. It had been an uninterrupted 15-year relationship. Homer and Angel upstairs, Wally and Candy in the former dining room downstairs. The four of them ate their meals together. Some nights, especially in winter, when the bare trees permitted more of the view of the lit dining room and kitchen windows of strangers' houses, Homer Wells liked to take a short car ride before dinner. He wondered about the families who were eating dinners together, what their real lives were like. St. Cloud's had been more predictable. What did anyone really know about all those families sitting down to have a meal? And again, Homer just seems ungrateful here. Like, dude, you have a family now. So be grateful for what you have. We are a family. Isn't that the main thing? Thank you, Candy. Finally, she says something I agree with. Candy asked Homer Wells whenever Homer appeared to her to be taking longer and longer drives before dinner. Angel has a family, a really wonderful family. That's the main thing, Homer agreed. And Wally would tell her how happy he was, how he felt that he was the luckiest man alive. How anyone would give up his legs to be as happy as Wally was. Those were the nights that Candy couldn't sleep. Those were the nights that she'd be aware of Homer Wells, who was wide awake too. Some nights they would meet in the kitchen. They'd have some milk and apple pie. Some nights when it was warm, they'd sit by the swimming pool, not touching each other. To any observer, the space between them would have indicated a quarrel, although they rarely quarreled. Also indifference, but they were never indifferent to each other. The way they sat by the pool reminded them both of how they used to sit on Ray Kendall's dock before they'd sat close together. If ever they were too conscious of this memory and of missing that dock, or of missing Ray, who died before Angel was old enough to have any memory of him, this would spoil their evening by the swimming pool, and they would be forced back to their separate bedrooms, where they would lie awake a little longer. Again, is there some way Irving could have written this with brevity? Boy, we don't need like a full synopsis of like Candy falling away from Homer. Like, we can just say they grew apart. Like, as he grew older and almost an insomniac as his father, Angel Wells would often watch Homer and Candy sitting by the pool, which he could also see out the window of his room. If Angel ever thought anything about the two of them sitting out there, it was why such old friends sat so far apart. Raymond Kendall had died shortly after Wally and Candy were married. He was killed when the lobster pound blew up. His whole dock was blown apart and his lobster boat sank. 2 old heaps of automobiles he was working on were jolted across his parking lot a good 25 yards down the coastal highway by the explosion, as if they'd been driven under by their own power. Even the picture window at the Haven Club was collapsed by the blast. It happened so late at night that the bar was closed, and none of the Havens Club regular drinkers was on hand to see their favorite eyesore obliterated from their view of Heart's Haven. Try saying that 5 times fast. Brady had been tinkering with his homemade torpedo for all of his legendary mechanical genius. He must have found out something about a torpedo that he did not know. Misfortune of someone you love can bring out the guilt in you. Candy regretted that she had not told her father about Homer and Angel Wells. There's no consolation to her that she imagined Ray already knew everything. She had been able to understand by his silences that he wanted to hear from her. Not even the death of her father could prompt Candy Kendall to tell her story to anyone. As far south on the coastal highway is Powell's Ice Cream Palace. There had been dead lobsters and lobster parts in the parking lot and in the road. This had prompted Herb Fowler, who was never caught without something funny to say, to ask old Mr. Powell if he was inventing a new ice cream flavor. Herb had waited for the summer that Angel Wells was 15 before he flicked Angel's first rubber. Angel's feelings were slightly hurt that Herb had not initiated him sooner. Angel's pal and coworker Pudgy Pete Hyde was only a few months older than Angel, not nearly so grown up in countless ways. Angel knew that Herb Fowler had bounced a rubber off Pete Hyde's head when Pete was only 13. What Angel had not yet fathomed was that Pete Hyde was a part of Ocean View's working class family. Angel, although he worked with the workers, was from the boss's family. The workers knew that Homer Wells ran Ocean View. He was the one most in charge. This would not have surprised Olive. It was clear that Candy and Wally were grateful for Homer's authority. Perhaps because the workers knew that Homer had come from St. Cloud's, they felt that he was closer to them. He lived in what Big Dog Taft called the fancy house. But he was like one of them. None of the workers resented that Homer was the boss, with the possible exception of Vernon Lynch, who resented any and every authority, all the more so since Grace Lynch had died. Total scumbag, by the way. Total scumbag. Easily the worst character, I think, in the novel. Even with Homer's dissent, like Vernon Lynch, for shame, for shame. Is he ever going to get his comeuppance too? Like what? And I mean that it's life. He doesn't necessarily need one, right? Like there are some people who get away with like murder practically. Look at most serial killers. Like some of them got away with murder for years before they were found. Candy, who looked into matters concerning the workers' wives, discovered that Grace had been pregnant. She died of acute peritonitis, followed by a misguided attempt to abort herself. Again, such a tragic character. Like Grace Lynch is probably the most sad and tragic character in this entire book. Even with Melanie, she's the saddest. Homer, who'd often wondered why she had not chosen to make a second trip to St. Cloud's, liked to think that she had not died in vain. It had been her death, and Dr. Harlow's particularly unsympathetic response to it that had prompted Nurse Caroline to resign from Cape Kenneth Hospital staff, as Homer Wells had been encouraging her to do. Nurse Caroline finally took Homer's suggestion and offered her services to St. Cloud's. Just a bunch of nurses, man. Angela, Edna, Caroline. I think there's at least one other that I'm not remembering. Homer Wells sent me, Nurse Caroline said when she introduced herself to Wilbur Larch. The old man had not grown too careless. Sent you for what? Larch asked. I'm a trained nurse, she said. I'm here to help you. Still got about like 10 pages left. I'll be right back. 472, hold tight. Okay, I'm back for the saga that is chapter 10, part 1. And by the way, this is just the first half of the chapter. Ay, ay, ay. Like, Irving was just not brief at all. Very long, very difficult chapters. Like, just, sheesh. I think we're almost there, though. Let me do what? Asked Larch, who was not very convincing at portraying innocence. I believe in the Lord's work, Nurse Carolyn said, exasperated. Why didn't you say so? Wilbur Larch asked. So he's giving me something besides apple trees, the old man mused. So there's still hope for him. Nurse Angela and Nurse Edna were so relieved to get Nurse Caroline that they weren't even jealous. There was the new blood that might hold the Board of Trustees at bay a while longer. The new nurse is a definite improvement to the situation, Dr. Gingrich confided to the board. I'd say that she takes a lot of pressure off making any immediate decision, as if they weren't trying to replace the old man every minute. I'd prefer a young doctor to a young nurse, Mrs. Goodall declared. Young doctor and a young administrator. You know how I feel about the records. The records of that place are pure whimsy. It's at least a temporary improvement. I'll buy that, she said. Wilbur Larch could have heard her. He would have said, just give me the time, lady. I'll buy more than that. But in 1950, Wilbur Larch was 90-something. And something else that's weird about Irving is his, lack of specificity pertaining to dates. 1950-something, he's 90-something. Just tell us the number, dude. It's fine. Sometimes his face would hold so still under the ether cone that the mask would stay in place after his hand had dropped to his side. Only the force of his exhalations would make the cone fall. He lost a lot of weight. In a mirror or traveling with his beloved ether, he had the impression that he was becoming a bird. Only Nurse Caroline had the courage to criticize his drug habit. You should know, of all people, Nurse Caroline told him roughly. Me, of all people, Larch asked innocently. Sometimes he found it was fun to provoke her. You've a low opinion of religion, Nurse Caroline remarked to him. I suppose so, he said cautiously. She's a little too young and quick for him, he knew. What do you suppose a drug dependency is if not a kind of religion? Caroline asked. I have no quarrel with anyone at prayer, Larch said. Prayer is personal. Prayer is anyone's choice. Pray to whom or what you want. It's when you start making rules. Said Wilbur Larch, but he felt lost. I mean, I'm only pretty sure that Larch has no sense of religion at all. He does not believe in religion. He doesn't. Yeah, he's just not religious. He's seen too much carnage. He knew she could talk circles around him. He admired socialism, but talking to a damn socialist was like talking to any true believer. He'd heard her way so many times that a society that approved of making abortion illegal was a society that approved of violence against women. That making abortion illegal was simply a sanctimonious, self-righteous form of violence against women. It was just a way of legalizing violence against women, Nurse Caroline would say. Yeah, just keep saying it over and over again. It's fine. We get the point. He'd heard her say so many times that abortions were not only a personal freedom of choice, but also a responsibility of the state to provide them. And by the way, Larch is not against abortions. He's been doing them for years. Yeah, he's actually been doing them for years. You know who would be a better recipient of this tirade or whatever you want to call it? Homer Wells. Because as far as I'm concerned, he's the only one that was not. He's the only one who's not doing abortions here. Once the state starts providing it, feels free to hand out the rules too, Larch blurted hastily. It was a Yankee thing to say, very Maine, but Nurse Caroline smiled. That led him into another of her arguments. She could always trap him. He was not a systems man, he was just a good one. In a better world, she began patiently. Her patience with him could make Larch furious. No, not in a better world, he cried. In this one, in this world. I take this world as a given. Talk to me about this world. But it all made him so tired. It made him want a little ether. The more he tried to keep it up with Nurse Caroline, the more he needed ether. The stronger he felt this need for it, the more that made her right. It can't always be right, Larch said tiredly. Yes, I know, Nurse Caroline said sympathetically. It's because even a good man can't always be right, that we need a society. You need certain rules. Call them priorities, if you prefer, she said. "Hmm. You can call them whatever you want," said Wilbur Larch testily. "I don't have time for philosophy or for government or for religion." "I don't have enough time," said Wilbur Larch. Always in the background of his mind, there was a newborn baby crying, even when the orphanage was silent as the few remaining abandoned buildings of St. Cloud's. Even when it was ghostly quiet, Wilbur Larch heard babies crying. They were not crying to be born, he knew they were crying because they were born. In the summer. Yeah, here we go again. Gosh dang, dude. In the summer, Mr. Rose wrote that he and the daughter might be arriving a day or so ahead of the picking crew. He hoped the cider house would be ready. Been a while since we've seen the daughter, Wally remarked in the Applemar office. Everett Taft was outside, oiling Wally's wheelchair for him, so Wally sat on the desk, his withered legs swinging limply, his unused feet in a perfectly polished pair of loafers. The loafers were more than 15 years old. Candy was playing with the adding machine. "I think the daughter is about Angel's age," she said. "Right," said Homer Wells, and Wally hit Homer with a very well-thrown jab, the only sort of punch he could really throw sitting down. Because Homer had been leaning on the desk and Wally had been sitting up straight, the punch caught Homer completely by surprise, very solidly in the cheek. The punch surprised Candy so much that she pushed the adding machine off the far counter of the desk. The machine crashed to the office floor, and when Homer hit the floor, he did not land quite as loudly or as dead weight as the adding machine, but he landed hard. Put his hand to his cheek, where he would soon have some swelling, and the start of a slight shiner. "Wally," Candy said. "I'm so sick of it," Wally shouted. "It's time you learned a new word, Homer," Wally said. "Jesus, Wally," Candy said. "I'm okay," Homer said, but he remained sitting on the office floor. "I'm sorry," Wally said. "It just gets on my nerves, you saying right all the time." "Thank you, Wally." Again, this guy just gets better and better as the novel goes on. Like this dude's a total hero, Wally. In the chapter, we got like, what, 5 pages left? Gosh dang, dude, it's like 6 pages. And this is just half the chapter. Like, good gosh, man. I'm just gonna keep pushing through. You're saying right all the time, although he not made this particular mistake for years. He lifted himself off the desk with his arms. It must have seemed to him that the appropriate thing to do would be to swing his legs off the floor and help Homer up to his feet. He'd forgotten that he couldn't walk. If Candy had not caught him under the arms and hugged him, chest to chest, Wally would have fallen. Homer got to his feet and helped Candy put Wally back on the desk. "I'm sorry, buddy," Wally said. He put his head on Homer's shoulder. Homer did not say right. Candy went to get a piece of ice and a towel for Homer's face, and Homer said, "It's okay, Wally. Everything's okay." I slumped a little forward, and Homer leaned over him. Their foreheads touched. Maintain that position until Candy returned with the ice. Most days for 15 years, Candy and Homer thought that Wally knew everything, that he accepted everything, but that he resented not being told. At the same time, Homer and Candy imagined that it was a relief to Wally, that he didn't have to admit that he knew everything. What new, uncomfortable position would they put him in by telling him now? Wasn't the main thing that Angel not know? Until Candy and Homer told him, the main thing was that Angel shouldn't hear it from anyone else. Whatever Wally knew, he would never tell Angel. If Homer was surprised, he was surprised that Wally had never hit him before. What was that all about? Candy asked Homer when they were alone that night by the swimming pool. Some kind of large whirring insect was caught in a leaf skimmer. They heard its wings beating against the soggy leaves. Whatever it was, it grew weaker and weaker. "Guess it's irritating how I say right all the time," Homer said. "No, it's more irritating that you just don't stop talking. I think that's the real annoyance." "Wally knows," Candy said. "That's what you've thought for 15 years," said Homer Wells. "And these are the kinds of conversations to have, too." "Can you just tell him, please, that that's Candy's son?" He just keeps going on and on and on. It's like, dude, we get it. All 0 viewers get it. "I think he loves you, and you love him," Homer said. "I think he knows we love Angel. I think Wally loves Angel, too." "Do you think he knows Angel is ours?" Candy asked. "I don't know," Homer said. "I know that one day Angel has to know he's ours." "I think that Wally knows I love you," he said. Homer just Please save yourself from your patheticness, please. And that I love you, Candy asked. Does he know that? You love me sometimes, Homer said, not very often. I wasn't talking about sex, Candy whispered. I was, said Homer Wells. Again, Homer just became a complete dumpster fire of a character. They've been careful and, in their opinion, almost good. Since Wally had come home from the war, Homer and Candy had made love only 270 times. Oh, that's all? Wow. What saints? Right? An average of only 18 times a year, only 1.5 times a month. They're simply as extremely careful as they knew how. It was another thing that Candy and insisted Homer agreed to, that for Wally's sake and for Angel's, and for the sake of what Candy called their family, they would never be caught. They never caused anyone even the slightest embarrassment. If anyone ever saw them, they would stop forever. What did they mean, saw them? What does he mean? I don't know. That was why they hadn't told Wally. Why wouldn't Wally accept that they thought he was dead, not just missing? That they had needed each other and that they'd wanted Angel too. They knew Wally would have accepted that. We couldn't accept what had happened. What was happening now was what they knew Wally wanted to know, and they couldn't tell him. They had another thing to be careful about. Because Wally was sterile, Candy's becoming pregnant would seem too miraculous to be believed. Because Wally's sterility was not the result of encephalitis. It would take him several years to discover that he was sterile. He remembered the unclean instrumentation, his urethra. He would remember it gradually, the way he remembered the rest of Burma. Once he learned that his epididymis was sealed for life, the specificity of the various bamboo shoots came back to him. Sometimes it seemed to him that he would recall exactly every catheter that had ever relieved him. There was no difference in the feeling of orgasm. Oh, man, jeez Louise. While he was fond of emphasizing this particular point to Homer Wells, Wally called it shooting. Homer was the only person with whom Wally could joke about his condition. I could still aim the gun and the gun goes off, Wally said, and it still goes off with a bang for me, he said. It's just that no one ever finds the bullet. Well, I remembered from time to time that one of the Burmese on the sampan would instrument him, for which he was always so grateful. There was never much bleeding, even when the bamboo shoot was not exactly straight. His blood seemed pale and minimal by comparison to the bloodier stains of the betel juice that everyone spat on the deck. Homer Wells got Candy pregnant again. Candy made him promise that this time he would give her an abortion. She could not fool Wally about another trip to St. Cloud's. She would not fool him, she said. So this added consideration. Candy never get pregnant. Contributed to the moderation of their coupling. Almost always managed under the conditions harsh enough to win the approval of New England's founding fathers. But not of one Wilbur Larch's approval. Established no pattern of behavior that could make anyone suspicious. As if everyone wasn't already suspicious regardless of how they behaved. There was no one place they met, no one day, no one time of day. In the winter months, when Angel after school would take Wally for a swim in the indoor pool of a private boys' academy, Homer and Candy could manage an occasional late afternoon together. Just as I could manage reading this chapter. And Homer's bed, which had been Olive's bed, which suffered from all the master bedroom connotations, was full of conflicting emotions for them both. The bed Candy shared with Wally had its own set of taboos. Really, they took trips. Cider House was fit to be used only in the late summer, after it had been made ready for the picking crew. Ever since Angel had learned to drive, he'd been given the run of the orchards. He was allowed to drive any of the farm vehicles, just so he kept off the public road. His pudgy pal Pete Hyde often drove around with him. Homer suspected that Pete and Angel used the cider house to drink beer in secret whenever they could convince Herb Fowler to buy beer for them, or that they were there for the 15-year thrill of smoking cigarettes. At night, trapped by their own insomnia, where could Candy and Homer have disappeared to, now that Angel was an insomniac too? Homer Wells knew that there was no reason ever to have an accident, no reason for Candy to ever get pregnant. Certainly not knowing what Homer knew. Reason for them ever to get caught either, but by being so reasonable and discreet, Homer regretted the loss of the passion which he and Candy had first collided. Well, she insisted, and he agreed that it was quite unnecessary for him to write to Dr. Larch to request which he did. The proper equipment with which to treat the emergency that Candy feared. For 15 years, Homer had told her, "You won't get pregnant. You can't." "Do you have everything you need if you need it?" she always asked him. "Yes," he said. He'd gotten better about not saying right since Wally had hit him, and the world would slip out, often attended by an equally involuntary wince, as if in anticipation of another punch, as if anyone he might say the word to would feel as strongly about it as Wally, and might be as fast as Mr. Rose. Uh, just keeps going, man. 485. I think what I'm going to do is I will. So let's see, what time is it? God, dude, I'm just so sick and tired of reading. Everyone is tired of listening to me. It's gonna be 11 o'clock. I think I might just have to cut this chapter into 3 parts. Is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go ahead and end here today. And yeah, I will pick up tomorrow. Let me see how long is chapter 11. Hold on. So praise for this book. Like, give me a break, man. It doesn't deserve praise. It's too long. That's the main problem. 521 is the final chapter. 580, 587 pages. One page. I think there was 100 pages left. So let me do the math. I was thinking 25 pages a day going forward. 478. It's got like over 100 pages left. It's on 87. So yeah, about 25 pages each time. I just keep reading it, keep subdividing it until it's reasonable. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. If you're on YouTube, if you're on TikTok, like, comment, follow, share, donate, Venmo Stormer Show. Thanks so much for watching. I've been your host, Stormer Show, signing out, signing off. Sleep tight, have a good night. As always, thanks for watching.